The train has left the station.
Oh, I'm running alongside it, trying to jump on.
All right, we got to start this one. This needs to be started right now. Yes. Yeah, baby, we're back with another session of the Podcast Engineering Show. My name's Chris Kerr, and I'm your host. Every week on this show, we really get into podcast production on a professional level. We have awesome guests, and this episode is no exception. Ross Brand is here. I'm going to mention him or introduce him in a second. But every week on this show, we really bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop. I have a background in music engineering, and I brought all that to podcast production. I do podcast production for a living, have a bunch of big companies as my clients. And if you implement the best of what you learn here, yes, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. Time is important. Right, Ross?
Time is money.
Time is money. Barry, do you agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Barry's with me. Barry is actually in studio with me today. All right, not really. But Barry was the maintenance guy in my old building in New Jersey, which is where you're from, Ross Brand.
It is. How come I've never met Barry?
You go to. Well, I'll name the town. Go to Parsippany, New Jersey, and
oh yeah, I know Parsippany.
Start asking around. You know.
Okay.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Westfield in Union County.
Oh, Westfield. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done several roofs in Westfield when I was in high school in the late 80s.
Oh, nice.
My dad had a roofing company, and we just every weekend we'd be roofing in Westfield. Was it Westfield? Yeah, it doesn't snow. It doesn't snow in Westfield because it was like in the fall and it was snowing, and my dad's like, "Oh, we're gonna go to the job anyway. It doesn't snow in Westfield."
He would have said that no matter where the job was, right?
Exactly. Crazy stuff. So Ross Brand,
no matter what.
Livestreamuniverse.com. That's your website. It'll be in the show notes. You do a lot of live streaming these days, and you're also a podcaster. You have several shows, Livestream Universe Update, Livestream Deals. Livestream Deals, you had me on as a guest once.
Yeah, that was a great one.
That was pretty cool. And also Brand on Broadcasting?
Yeah, Brand on Broadcasting.
Okay. I thought I might have mistyped it. But yeah, okay, cool. And you're also part of the Video Marketing Top 25. Who you got included on that list, huh?
Yeah, that was Onalytica. Does these lists, top lists from every so often. I think it was maybe 2017.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you also do speaking and stuff, but I guess live streaming, is that like the main thing you're into these days?
Yeah, I mean, I came from radio. I worked on air and radio for 12 years, and then went and did other things. And one day I stumbled into Blab. I don't know how many people remember, but it's basically, it was a platform that let you have 4 people on camera at the same time, coming in each from their own locations. And I didn't even know really what it was. And it was like, oh, wow, this is like talk radio heaven in here. It's like everybody's got their own talk show in here. This is great. And so I really just kind of fell in love with broadcasting again and started live streaming, started a weekly interview show. And since then, I've been doing it. And of course, I coming from radio, I love audio only content as well. So been making some of my shows into podcasts, and also been doing a regular update in which I talk about what's going on in live streaming and turn that into a flash briefing as well for your Amazon Alexa devices. Don't want to set anybody's device off.
Yeah.
You might be listening to this on one of those devices, and all of a sudden it'll pause or shut down or something. So, but yeah so that's I'm just really enjoying the online side of broadcasting, if you want to call it that, or social broadcasting, doing shows with a live audience, getting the feedback and the comments and all that kind of stuff is a whole new world, and I just love it.
That's awesome, man. Well, you're using a lot of good equipment. We're going to go through your equipment and everything as we normally do, and then I want to really spend part of this episode talking about live streaming, because I've just within the last few months started dipping my toe into that pool, and it's been okay. It's been a learning curve, and I came into it with the attitude of, you know what, this is going to take me a while to understand fully and actually start doing it well. So I'm just kind of having fun.
Right.
I actually decided on a time slot that I wanted to stream every week, because when you listen to people telling you the best practices for live streaming, they always tell you at least maybe once a week, just always stream on the same day and at the same time, so that people start to get to know that you'll be live at that time. And so I actually have a slot in my calendar. It's actually Wednesday. Let me look at it. It's actually Wednesday evenings from 5 to 7 Mountain Time, which is 7 to 9 Eastern. And anyway, I've done it once or twice in that slot, but I still haven't done it enough where people are expecting me there. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think it's a best practice when you're starting out. After you build an audience and whatever, then for your live streams, you have an audience for podcasting. But for live streaming, when you're starting out, the best way people can find you is they remember, okay, that was pretty cool listening to him from whenever to whenever. So we'll check back the next week at the same time and see if he's there again.
Right.
So, and then you can promote it and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think it's a really good practice if you're live streaming to set a time and make sure people know when that time is. Give it out on the podcast and anywhere else you can. And I'm sure, over time you'll start really developing an audience, because you do great stuff on live streaming. I really enjoyed listening to your live stream recently where you were testing out Auphonic, and I was going along in the comments and stuff, and then I had to drive, so I kind of put it on radio mode and just listened to it as I was driving for a while. It was really good.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, now it's time, before we get to the speed round, we're going to close the loop on, if you listen to episode 100, which I hope you did, episode 100 of this show, because that was literally, many people came up to me after they heard episode 100, and they're like, wow, that was really good, for real. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. And so, and it's because I included 19 audio clips that my friends and past guests had sent in. And I want to play the one you sent in, Ross, because it was it was one of the best ones. And I want people to know that this is you. And so let's listen to it.
Okay. Hey, Chris, it's Ross Brand from LivestreamUniverse.com. Congratulations on 100 episodes of the Podcast Engineering Show, one of my favorite podcasts. In honor of your 100th episode, I have a very special gift for you you're going to love. It's your very own Blue Yeti microphone. And what's so great about this microphone is you don't have to be close to it at all. In fact, you don't even have to go into the studio to do your show. You can just do it from wherever you are, and the Blue Yeti will pick you up. No longer will you have to mic your guests, each one individually. Just plop that Blue Yeti down in the middle of the table and let everybody talk as they want to. And it's really the pinnacle of your career to be able to record with that great Blue Yeti microphone. You're going to love it. Congratulations on 100 episodes, Chris, and wishing you all the best on the next 100.
So that was just classic. And what's funny, too, is I think one or two other people actually sent an audio and mentioned the Blue Yeti as well.
Oh, I thought the funniest line, well, I don't even know if I'm comfortable repeating it, but you're so bad at something, they call you the Blue Yeti.
Oh, yeah. Ralph gave me some nickname or something. Yeah.
That was too funny. I try not to be, I've not liked the Blue Yeti since I never knew about it until I started live streaming, and I never liked it because it just picks up so much darn noise from people's keyboards, from their chairs, from a fan, from, like I say, somebody 11 flights down moved
the neighbors.
Yeah.
The lawnmower next door.
The church bell goes off 3 towns over, and but I also don't want to discourage people, because for somebody who is using their internal microphone and somebody gives them a Blue Yeti, they probably are going to be better off using a Blue Yeti than using the built-in microphone or the microphone in their webcam. And there's even a few live streamers and podcasters who get pretty good sound out of it.
Yeah.
But overall, as you put it perfectly, it's just the wrong mic for podcasting in almost every situation.
Right. Right, which is, it's okay. It's a good mic. It's just not right for everybody's situation. So, and I've said that enough so people understand that. But anyway, thanks again for sending in the clip for the 100th episode, and let's do the speed round now. And for folks who don't know, the speed round is when we go through how you're producing a podcast episode from the very beginning to the very end. And it's just like a 30-second quick overview of what mic you're using, where it's plugged in, what software you're using, and just like that. But in your case, I just want to clarify, are you recording any podcast just to be a podcast, or are all of your podcasts audio from live streams that you've done?
I'm actually doing some just as podcasts.
Okay.
And it actually depends on the episode. So some I'll do as a live stream and make it into a podcast. Some I will do strictly as a podcast. Some will be depending on the circumstance. Like if I'm at an event and it's easier to just get some audio and go, then I'll do the interview that way. If there's an opportunity to do video, I might do that. So I'm kind of flexible with it.
All right. So for the speed round, let's stick with when you're recording for a podcast only and then producing that audio. So yeah, take us through real quick, starting with your mic, through your equipment and your software, and yeah, just a quick overview.
Okay, so I have a Shure SM7B microphone, which is plugged in through an XLR into MixPre 3, which is a combination of audio interface, mixer, and recorder, and that goes by USB into my computer. And I'm actually record right into the MixPre 3. I also record on my computer in ScreenFlow. I know that's not the most advanced audio editing that you could have, but that's what I use as of now, or I record in Wirecast, which is essentially made by the same people. It's essentially the same digital recording as recording in ScreenFlow, but that's generally what I use for podcast recording.
Okay, and then like editing and finalizing it, you do it in ScreenFlow.
That's right.
Okay, and then you tag it.
I upload it to Auphonic. In most cases, if it's something really short and sounds okay, then I'll just go with it. Like if it's a 30-second to a minute flash briefing, I might not do that with Auphonic, but for the longer podcasts, I find they usually come out better if I let the folks at Auphonic do what they do.
Yeah.
Do the magic that they do after you have done everything that you do on it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. And then you upload it. What podcast host do you use?
I use Spreaker, Libsyn, and the PowerPress plugin from Blueberry. A couple of mine are just Spreaker, and then I have one that I actually use all three hosts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why do you use multiple hosts?
Yeah, because I'm a lunatic.
No. Well, welcome to the show.
I started on Libsyn, realized that I liked the way that Blueberry did the feed from Blueberry to distribute it. And then I started doing a flash briefing from it. And there was I forget what, I had to make some change. So I had just joined Spreaker anyway and had the wanted to get that going. So I decided to make that the feed to my flash briefing, but I didn't want to change all the other ones. So most of those were like you had to apply to get on or whatever were coming from the Blueberry PowerPress plugin. So I just kept that and I just drop it into that. And then Libsyn really made it quick to get on like Spotify and iHeart. So since I already was paying for the hosting anyway, I just clicked those and was using it. I just clicked those buttons. So I have experience with all three of those companies, and I got to say, nothing's ever gone wrong with any of them as far as, any of my uploads or downloads or anything like that. So I'm really happy with all three of them. Yeah. But Spreaker's the one where the two newer podcasts that I do are hosted exclusively, and I just love the Spreaker, easy for me to say, the Spreaker, the plug, what do you call it? It's like an embed of their player. It's really nice. And you can make like the jukebox out of it, or just really nice visually. It lays out nice on a website. So I enjoy using that. But I use them all. Like when I do social posts, I like all the way the players from all the different apps that your podcast shows up on.
Right.
I love how, like, on Twitter or whatever, some of them people can just play and listen to it right there. It's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, there's that. That's interesting. You're doing all that, and it's so natural because that's what happens. Is like you start a podcast, you register it somewhere, or I mean, you start it with one host, and then you have another show, and you're like, well, I want to do this one slightly different. So then,
Right.
Over the years, you end up with a few different things. So that's totally normal.
Each time you simplify a little more, you're like,
yeah,
there's a faster way, an easier way to do this.
yeah. I mean, that's why I think it was probably a couple years ago now, or maybe more than 2 years, I decided that every show I start now is just I'm gonna use Libsyn, and I'm gonna generate my feed right from Libsyn, and that's it. And no nonsense and no,
right.
And so that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing with my clients. But I still have shows that, my show, it's called The Mystic Show. It's about spirituality and meditation and all that. And it's my host is Libsyn, but I'm actually running the feed is from my WordPress, and it goes through FeedBurner. Remember that old way? You might not even remember that.
I've heard of it, but
yeah. And so
I see every time I go into the Blueberry PowerPress, I see FeedBurner is no longer needed, or Feedly or something like that.
Yeah, anyway, but that's how it is, and it's like, well, someday I might have to somehow switch it over. But
Right.
You know what? The folks over at Libsyn, they've been, and I'm sure Blueberry's the same way. They can really help you sort of migrate your show over and keep the show notes and you know what I mean? Like that can be done. So if anyone ever feels like you're stuck with one host or you want to change, I think you can change. I don't think it's the end of the world, even though it seems like it would be the end of the world to move everything over.
And what I love about podcasting and making even the live stream shows into podcasts, it just feels like you own your content more with podcasting. You have more freedom to move around. You're less at the whim and will, the whim of an algorithm and things like that. It just feels more like you own your content, and you have so many options for distributing it, and the way it archives in the different apps gives people a chance if they want to go back and see what you did 6 months ago or a year ago, or look up some episode that they were in or whatever. I just like the way it all presents itself for future use,
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's why podcasting is slowly blowing up. And I love the slowness of the blow up, because that means that it's going to be around for a long time.
That's right.
So, actually, I just want to ask Barry. Barry, you had previously listened to some of Ross's shows, Live Stream Deals and the Live Stream Universe Update. When you listened to those shows that Ross was hosting, what did you hear?
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right.
Really? Profanities left and profanities right? Wow. Anything else?
I don't remember that episode.
Anything else?
Every second word was a F word.
That sounds like me.
Oh, geez. All right.
Well, coming from Jersey, that's just another adjective, right?
Right?
No.
Totally.
No, my stuff's completely clean. You can listen to it with the family in the car. It's totally fine.
Totally. Yeah. I love that. I like podcast. Like, I think if your podcast does not have to be dirty, like if you don't have to use curse words, I don't think you should, because it really does turn some people off. Like, I mean, and look, it's up to the person doing the podcast, but some podcasts, they curse a lot, and it makes sense because of what they're doing. But like my show, for instance, I don't want, there's no reason to curse on this show. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So why offend a bunch of people? So
I agree with you, and I doesn't bother me when people curse on their show. I mean, most of the time I'm listening to a podcast, I'm by myself, right? But if somebody wants to listen to my live stream update while they're driving their kids to school or whatever, why should they have to go like, oh, I better not, because I don't know what he's going to say that I don't want. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why lose an audience member or make it more complicated for your audience to listen when it has no impact on the content that you're creating?
Right. I agree. And of course, I'm going to ask Barry. Barry, do you curse on your show?
No way. You crazy?
Actually, that'd be cool if Barry had a show. So here's the thing, Ross. You did a great job filling out the form to be a guest on this show. So
Okay.
I'll just explain for all the listeners. When someone is a potential guest for this show, I send them to a webpage and there's a form to fill out. It's just a few questions to answer, and it really just helps me understand what kind, like the level of production of the potential guest, right? Because believe it or not, I have had people on the show early on who literally all they do is plugged in an ATR 2100 USB into their laptop, and they record with like Skype and call recorder, and they didn't even edit their own show. They would just send it to someone. And I'm like, well, that's not the best guest for this show, because this show, we want to talk about all the technology and the really detailed technical engineering of podcasts, right? So anyway, I send people to this page. So you filled it out. You did a great job. And so I want to go through your audio setup here. I'm going to go through some of the notes you sent me, and we'll just talk about each one a little bit. So you got the Shure SM7B. You said you compared a lot of different mics before you decided on that, huh?
Yeah, so I started with a Samson Q2U. Actually, I tried an ATR 2100 and did not like it at all. I thought it sounded, for me, right? One thing you got to understand, people got to understand, I know you know this, that different mics work well with different voices. So if I say I didn't like a mic, it doesn't mean it's not good or couldn't work well for somebody. It just wasn't good for me. But to me, it sounded cold and tinny. And on top of it, it smelled like the worst smell you've ever smelled was this ATR 2100 that I bought new. Like I was going to say, was it used? No, not as far as I know. So anyway, I returned it, and I saw a box for a Samson Q2U and didn't know anything about it, but I just had an instinct that okay, I'm going to like this. So I bought it, and that was my primary, live streaming podcasting mic for a couple years. And it's a USB mic, but it comes with XLR cable. I mean, people say it's basically the same mic as the ATR 2100. I think it's a better mic than the ATR 2100. It's a little, at least for me, it's a little warmer. It's got a little more oomph to it. It looks more professional.
Yeah. When we did all the microphone test drives, that the Q2U does have more low end. It's like more a little bit more body and beefiness in the low frequencies.
Right. So that really, I tell people if they're starting out and they don't know what to get and they're not ready to get an audio interface or an expensive mixer or anything like that, start out, if you have no gear, start out with that microphone, because you can plug it in with a USB, but you can later use it with a mixer. You can take it out in the field with you. If nothing else, I mean, it's a backup mic for me now, right? Totally. And that's fine, because occasionally, I don't know if you know anybody that's ever had this or not, but occasionally you can't get your audio interface to work right with your computer, and you're about to go live, and you finally go, well, bleep this, and you grab the USB mic, you plug it in, and the show goes on. And when you're live streaming, you have no choice. I do have a couple other interfaces I can use, and the Mix Pre 3 is great. But that mic comes in handy. It comes in handy like when I went to Podcast Movement. If I wanted to record a podcast, I have an Electro Voice RE50, which is my primary interview mic. But if I have a second person, the Samson Q2U, you plug it in to recorder, sounds fine. So I was happy with that as a mic. But eventually I wanted to get back to the mics. Yeah, to answer your question a half an hour later. So I tested out the mics. The cool thing about living near New York City is that B&H is a store in New York City there where they have a mic room, and you can actually go in with one of their audio people and test out different mics. So I was sure, even though I got a sure, I was confident when I left the house that I was going to come home with an RE20. That was like the whole trip was to get an RE20.
Right.
But, my experience told me you want to try these, right? And you don't want to just buy a mic. You want to try them and see what works best. So I compared the RE27, the RE20, and the Shure SM7B. The RE27, which was the most expensive of the three mics, was eliminated quickly. Boy, that mic sounded horrible with my voice.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, it was just too bright or something wasn't right with it, right?
Yeah, it's bright.
It just didn't bring out anything positive for me. So that was eliminated quickly. It was really close between the Shure SM7B and the RE20. And the guy who was helping me out said, maybe you should try the Heil PR40. And I kind of resisted because it just seems like it's such a thing in podcasting where people who don't necessarily have a lot of experience with microphones go, okay, time to step it up. I'm getting a Heil PR40.
Right.
So, and not all of them sound great with it. And I think, so I kind of felt like that wasn't on my list, but I tried it and I found it really, I was pleasantly surprised. In fact, it really sounded great with my voice. But in comparing it to the other two microphones, it just wasn't as clean throughout the whole kind of range.
Right.
It had a little more, I don't know if you want to call it a process sound, but it didn't seem quite as flat or clear. I don't know. So it came down once again, but it was a really close one. So I mean, I think it's a good mic. I used it at when I recorded at Podcast Movement when we did the live. We did a couple of live shows at the setup that they had with all Heil gear.
Right.
And it really nicely cut through the noise because it was a busy place with people coming in and out in the middle of a hotel and outside the, some of the rooms where the conference was going on and people were mingling out around us and stuff like that. So in that sense, it really cut nicely through the noise while picking up just enough nice little ambient sound that it really sounded good. You were on location, you were live, you were recording something. So I felt good about that mic, but I really thought that overall the Shure SM7B and the RE20 were the two best. And from there, I tried them again and I got another sound guy, a different sound guy to listen. And then I tried the Heil again with him, and he came to the same conclusion about the Heil being really good, but not quite as good for me as the other two. And what it felt like is that the RE20 was like a really solidly built car that's going to take you right down the middle of the road and get you where you want to go. And the SM7B can kind of do that, can really do that just about as well. But it also can sort of swerve a little bit and get you around things. And I just felt like it had a little more subtlety to it, the SM7B. They're both powerhouses, but it's like, let me give another analogy is if you like football, they're both running backs that can run you over, but the SM7B can kind of, scoot by you too, or make you miss,
Right.
And so that's how I felt about it. And this mic it's just so clean and it's so, just really natural sounding, but it does need a little work sometimes, to get the most out of it. But if you're able to do that work, and I want to, I'm planning to learn more and more about production and also, tweaking things on the hardware side as well, you can really get this mic. I think if it works for you, you can really make it work for you.
Yeah, solid mic. So good choice. And so now you said when you're on location, you're using an Electro Voice RE50. So what is that? Is it a handheld, like sort of a reporter mic, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's an omnidirectional reporter mic. It's as gain hungry as the Shure SM7B, maybe more. I mean, it's super gain hungry. The fact that it's omnidirectional doesn't mean you can put it down in the middle of the table and like sit on the opposite ends of a long table or something. You still need to be close to it, but it just is a really good sounding mic. It's a really reliable, natural sounding mic.
Right.
And it's kind of the industry standard for reporting mics. I mean, there are other ones that people use. You can probably use an SM58 is great and low handling noise, but this is like zero handling noise. You almost got to like throw it around to get handling noise on the Electro Voice RE50.
Right, and it's omnidirectional, so it picks up from every direction pretty much equally. And one of the technical aspects of that, which I would like to just tell everyone about real quick, is that omnidirectional microphones are typically cleaner and more robust than cardioid pattern mics. And here's the reason. To make a microphone a cardioid pattern, you have to start doing phasey stuff to it. You have to start like the rear rejection, like any audio from the rear, you have to put it out of phase and then add it back in to cancel it out. So a cardioid mic, technically speaking, is literally doing phasing tricks to cancel out some of the audio that you don't want in there. So it's almost processing the signal. But an omnidirectional mic doesn't do any of that. It's just a mic with a diaphragm, and it picks up sound equally from everywhere. So in that sense, it's in a way cleaner, you might want to say, and sometimes you can really hear that. So I'm not surprised to hear that you're saying the RE50 really sounds good.
Yeah, and in fact, you know how the mics really start getting more expensive on the higher end dynamic, and if you get a condenser, that's even often more expensive if you want a good one. For less than $200, about $175, $180, the RE50 is like, probably as good an interview mic as you're going to ever need for, doing broadcasting and doing, if you were doing radio, you're doing podcasting, live streaming. And when I've been on the road, I've plugged it into an interface and into my computer, and it's been fine to host the show. I mean, I just hold it and do what I do.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so your primary audio interface is the MixPre 3, which is awesome. And by the way, the reason I laughed before when you mentioned, sometimes when you have problems with your interface, you just want to plug in the Samson Q2U. Because you and I connected about 4 hours ago to record this episode, and we literally spent an hour troubleshooting the feedback, and something wasn't working, and it took us a long time to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of education that happened along the way on both sides, but it was good. It was an interesting hour, but literally after an hour, we're like, I was like, I can't really do the interview right now, man.
Yeah.
I'm drained.
Well, I learned how to go out of basic mode into custom and advanced mode, so I'm excited now to play around with some of the other settings on this, but I left it alone from when we worked on it until now.
Yeah. And by the way, the thing, just for the listeners, the thing that was causing the feedback was and I've noticed this too, because I have a MixPre 6, you have a MixPre 3. One of the things you can do with any audio interface on a Mac, okay, I'm talking about on a Mac, is when you connect the interface, that's fine. The computer will recognize the interface, that's fine. But then you go to the audio MIDI setup. It's called audio MIDI setup, and you can actually choose like the number of inputs and outputs for that audio interface. So, I think the standard is 2 in and 2 out, but
right.
These MixPre 3 and MixPre 6, like I have 6 inputs and 2 outputs. And so we changed that. So the thing that was causing the feedback was apparently you had your audio MIDI setup set on 2 inputs to your MixPre 3, and when we changed it to 4 inputs, it all of a sudden it worked and there was no feedback. So really what you're doing is, what we did was we configured the audio interface properly, meaning with the computer. Now the audio interface and the computer are speaking the same language and they're on the right setting. So on a Mac, especially if you're having problems with interfaces or anything, audio MIDI setup, it's like a little app. And then on a PC, I mean, it's kind of similar, but you just go to your your sound preferences and stuff like that. Your control panel, sound, and then all that input and output. All right, your backup audio interface is an Audient ID14. Now, is that...
Yes.
That's an audio interface, and how many inputs and outputs?
It's got 2 channels. So
Okay.
it's got I believe it's just 2 channels. Yeah, it's got 2 XLR combo jacks. So you could use XLR or quarter inch.
Got it.
So you could go in there. I'm not sure you can use a line. I'm not sure you can bypass the preamp. What
Okay.
you would need to do a quarter, like if you were to do a lot going on the line level, I think you would need to bypass, right?
Well, yeah. You would just usually you can just turn the mic preamp down all the way. That
Okay.
sometimes works. It actually depends on the piece of hardware.
Because I know, like Audient, this ID line, I think they're ID 22 or 44. Some of them it's set up so that you can bypass, or there's other ways to do it if you want to come in at a line level. For this, I'm pretty sure you have to use the preamps, and the preamps are really, really good on the Audient. And the from what everything I understand, the audio to digital conversion and vice versa is really good on it too. So it's a really I think it's a really good audio interface. It requires a cloud lifter though in order to use the SM7B, which I have. But the Mix Pre is amazing because not only am I not using a cloud lifter, but I've only got the gain up about 60%.
Right. Yeah.
And the headphone amp on this is like off the charts.
Oh.
Good.
That's right. We talked about that earlier. You like to hear your voice in your headphones and all that.
Yeah, it's tougher with the Audient because when I can hear myself really well, then it sounds like the person I'm talking to is far too loud. Like you would sound like you were screaming it.
Okay.
And yes, I can change it. Like the Audient comes with a digital mixer that you have on your computer, and you can adjust some of the settings there.
Right.
But then if I pull your settings down to where it's comfortable for me to hear through the headphones, I'm changing how it would record if I was recording locally on my computer or sending that audio to another device or something like that.
Huh.
So you're not mixing with that digital mixer. You're not mixing what you're sending if you're streaming somewhere, right? So I'm not mixing what's going out to Facebook if I'm live streaming. I'm not mixing what I'm sending to you from my computer if I'm using the digital mixer. That's being set by the level that I set my microphone at, the gain on the actual Audient interface. But what that digital mixer is doing is you're mixing together what would be recorded if you were recording it on your computer before it's streamed out somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good distinction there because
it's kind of complicated. But at first I didn't get it. But like, yeah, and it's so it's a really good interface. But it's kind of become redundant based on the fact that I got the Mix Pre. It's 2 in, 2 out, so it's got a headphone out, and it's got the left-right quarter-inch line outs if you wanted to go to monitors. Do you want me to talk about how I use it? How I used it when I was live streaming, or
let's get to that after we cover the audio.
Because I actually used it for audio while I was live streaming for a different audio send.
Okay.
So just real quick, what I did was I took where you have the left and right quarter-inch line outs,
right,
and I went into. Okay, the audio interface number 3 is the little Shure audio interface. It's about $129. Shure Motive MVI interface. Yeah, it's a single channel XLR and quarter-inch input. So I came out of the left and right and went into the single channel input on the Shure interface. God, this is a little complicated to explain. Okay. And then from there, okay, so you go back out analog, right? Because you'd be going back out to monitors or to headphones or to something else, right? So you go back out of the Audient in analog, and it runs analog to the Shure interface, which converts it to digital and then sends that, bypasses the the built-in mic on the phone and sends that, for example, out to Instagram Live, so that if I was, say, putting this interview on Instagram, people who wouldn't just see me, from the video from my phone and hear me, but they would get this mic that I'm using to talk with you now, would also go out to Instagram, and so would your voice through the return through the mixer. And I can do the same thing with the Mix Pre 3. I just haven't done it yet. So the reason why I got the Mix Pre 3 is because I can record within the Mix Pre 3, whereas the Audient, I would have to, if I wanted to record outside my computer, then I would have to get a recorder and use that, the left-right line out to go into, like a Zoom recorder or something like that. So that's why I decided to go with the Mix Pre 3 over the Zoom. And then I found out it's got these awesome preamps and headphone amp, and it's impossible to just go, well, I got it to be a recorder, but I'm using it for everything.
Right. All right, so I just want to clarify what we're talking about. So we're talking about your Audient ID14 interface connected to your computer. And so and ultimately what you're doing is streaming on Instagram Live.
So I'm streaming, we're having this conversation, right? Let's say we were using some video software. And so I'm sending my audio through the Audient to the computer to a platform. Your audio comes in as well to that platform, and then it's streaming out to Facebook, right? But your audio is also returning to me so I can hear it through the interface.
Right.
And then I'm mixing that with my microphone audio and sending that signal together down to a separate interface, which then goes into the phone to go to Instagram.
Right. So on Instagram, the video you're seeing on Instagram is only you.
Right.
Got it.
But people can hear the entire, so if they want to listen to it like a radio show or whatever, they can do that.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I thought you were doing. So that's good we clarified that. So that's
so
cool.
I can do the same thing with the Mix Pre 3. I just go out the stereo, the little 1/8 inch 3.5 millimeter stereo out.
Right.
I guess I go into a quarter inch. I think I have one of those adapters. It's not a perfect conversion or whatever. It's not a perfect transition, but it's better than what most people get on Instagram.
Yeah, audio. Yeah, well, live streaming is typically has audio that's not great. So
yeah, and then they degrade it in the recording as well. So as bad as it is live, they make it worse when they record. So that's why I like recording in the Mix Pre 3, because I get my audio, my guest's audio before it streams to before Facebook records it or whatever platform you go to. And one day, maybe when bandwidth is cheaper or storage is more available or whatever, I wonder if they already have like backup copies of the stuff at a higher level before they degrade it, that they might be able to at some day use or sell or do something with, who knows. But, for now, they have to reduce the quality so that it works, everybody can get it.
Right. Well, when I was doing my streaming from my computer, right. I would run QuickTime locally and just capture my screen and also capture all the audio, route all the audio through loopback and audio hijack. And then what I would record in QuickTime would be a high resolution, video recording of my screen with all the audio, and it boom, got it.
Right.
Got it locally.
That's a much easier way to do things.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing, and this is what I used to do with the podcast engineering school classes, because we do the 2-hour classes are live, and I would use Zoom to conduct the classes, but then I would record my screen locally, and then I would actually process the audio separately, and then also trim the video, and then I'd have to render the entire video file again. And so then that ended up being like a lot of post-production, because I had to process the audio, then I had to edit the video, and then render it, and then upload it to Vimeo. And so now it's easier, because when I do the classes on QuickTime, I wait till the last second to hit record, and then I immediately start the class. And then as soon as we're done, I click stop on QuickTime. So it literally captures my screen and captures all the audio, and boom, then it's done. Then I just upload that to Vimeo, and I'm done.
Is that the free version of QuickTime, or do you have to buy like the pro version or whatever?
No, it comes with every Mac. Yes, that's the QuickTime that comes with every Mac. And the only thing I wish I could do in that scenario is I like doing post-processing because, especially on my mic, even though I have like a little windscreen in front of my mic, it cuts down on the plosives a lot, but there still are some plosives in my voice when I either when I stream live or when I do a live screen recording. When I record this podcast, like right now, in post-production, I run the deplosive on my voice, and I get rid of these little plosives that are just a little bit annoying to me. But when I do live, I tried running the deplosive live in Audio Hijack, but it added like 350 milliseconds of delay, basically.
Oh.
And so then the picture would be off with the sound, and you can't do that.
Right.
So I have to live with it. I have to live with the fact that when my voice goes out live or when I do a screen recording, live, there's going to be some plosives, and that's just going to have to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could record the audio separately, I guess, and then you could sync it afterwards.
Well,
or it still would be delayed.
No. I could do that. I could record the audio with Audio Hijack, but then, like I said, I got to process the audio.
Right.
Then I got to open my video editor, bring in the new audio. Then I have to render that entire video. And
Which probably isn't necessary for a course, right? Like if I'm listening to a course, I'm not generally going, that guy's got, now I know this is your field and everything, but I'm not generally going like too many plosives in this course. I think I'm going to, like, I'm too busy trying to get the knowledge and get out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you do hear it in some podcasts and even some very big people in radio, the plosives go nuts on, and I'm guilty of it too, because usually people with, who push the mic a little bit with their voice, they're going to have some plosives in there. It's it's going to happen.
Well, that's why I see these videos of people on radio and they have an RE20 with no pop filter, no windscreen on it at all.
Right.
And I'm like, if I did that, the plosives would be unbelievable. But I think in radio, the way they process the audio, they must have some sort of like really fast acting compressor for the low end that just can, it's a multi-band compressor, I'm sure is what it is.
Right.
And they can just squash the low end so those plosives aren't major at all. I'm guessing that's what they do. I'd love to talk to somebody in radio about how can you be 1 inch from an RE20 with no windscreen and I don't hear any pops. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like you said, there's a little bit, but not much.
Right.
So, all right, then you do your post-production in ScreenFlow. Now, like you said, okay, maybe ScreenFlow is not the optimum software, and it's probably not. But if that's what you know, and you can do what you need to do, I don't see there's any problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, and I've used ScreenFlow when I've had multiple tracks. Like usually I just, since I've gotten the mix pre, I just record like the left-right mix, stereo mix together or whatever, and then just edit that. But when I was at Podcast Movement, they recorded the live shows that I did on a Zoom recorder in separate tracks from myself and my guest. And man, what a difference it makes when you're editing. Where, like I might say something that stepped on the end of my guest comment or something like that, and to be able to just take out whatever I said and not lose anything on the guest sound quality, it opened my eyes to now I want to record in multiple tracks. And so ScreenFlow is more than capable of doing it. It's, you can add effects and compression and things like that in ScreenFlow. I don't know how good that stuff is, so I haven't messed around with it. I usually just boost, if I need to, the level somewhere so that if there's a softer part, I'll make it louder, so that the level of the audio is fairly even. I'll cut out if, there's gaps or something like that. and then I'll send it over to Auphonic and let them do their magic on it.
Right, and mixing out of ScreenFlow is easy, right? You just render it as an audio-only file, correct?
Yeah, an M4A, and then I upload it to Auphonic and choose MP3 and download it from there, which makes it even a little bit smaller file.
Right, and then and do you do the leveling? What features do you use with Auphonic? The leveling or the low end roll off?
I use straight default.
Oh well.
I use it straight as whatever their default set is, because that's the people who introduced it to me told me that's how they use it. But after watching your video last week, I'm now thinking, okay, there's a lot that I can customize this thing to really, work on what needs to be done on it, rather than just, kind of sort of give it a final washing or whatever.
Right. Well, but I'm sure right now, the way you're using it right now, you probably choose like an overall loudness level, right?
It's set to whatever the setting is for podcasts and internet or whatever.
Got it. Yeah. That's so for mono is -19, stereo is -16 LUFS. Oh, but by the way, and I might have to do an episode on this because, well, not a whole episode, but apparently Spotify and Amazon ALE
right
they are now requesting audio that's 2 LUFS louder than the -16, -19 sort of unofficial standard. Yeah, but I know one of them, at least one of them, they'll raise the level of your audio on their end by themselves. You don't have to do it. So for me, I'm sticking with -19 mono, -16 stereo, and if Alexa, if that Amazon or Spotify wants to raise it up 2 more LUFS, fine, go ahead. But like, I'm not going to change my entire production and participate in this. This is like the podcasting loudness wars. This is like rock music in the '90s and stuff. It's like,
well, they boosted enough. People just turn their volume down a couple notches.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get you want it to be loud because you want, like, if someone's, some phones you want it to be louder because people need to turn it louder, and it's like sometimes if the audio on we've all probably had times when you're watching a YouTube video on your phone and you're in a place that's a little bit loud, like you're in a loud place, maybe on an airplane even, and you'll crank the volume of your phone all the way up, and it's still not loud enough. So I understand why they want the loudness standards to be even louder, because it just helps. It just helps, right? Because it makes it a little bit louder and a little bit easier to hear in loud places. But, again, there's no technical standard for the loudness of podcasting. I mean, there's the recommendations are -16 and -19. And until everyone in the industry starts saying, oh, everyone's got to change their standards, I'm not changing anything. So.
Right. Do you think that because some of the apps don't just sort of reach into your original file through the directory, but they actually copy the file into their own server and then play it off of that? Do you think that some of them sound a little bit different depending which app you listen to? Like some may be adding a little something to it, a little boost or a little sweetening or something to the sauce.
I actually don't know. I haven't heard that, but here's the thing. Stitcher used to do that, but they stopped doing that like a long time ago, 3 or 4 years ago at least. Right. Stitcher used to do that. They would actually make their own copy of your episode and put it on their server, and then that's why it was so annoying that like then you'd have to look at your regular download statistics, and then you'd have to go to Stitcher and look at your Stitcher download statistics and add them together in your head. So, but now Stitcher does not do that. They pull the audio from your feed, which is just better. Castbox apparently recently did something like that, or maybe they even created a new feed for every show, like their own feed. So it was getting weird with like tracking subscriber numbers, and everyone in the industry really came down hard on Castbox, and I think they stopped doing that. But I think still, if you search the internet, you can find a bunch of shows that you could find their feeds that aren't their real feeds, and anyway, that's annoying. But yeah, so besides that, I don't know if any podcast directory is now sort of caching your file and making a different copy of it, and maybe degrading it or doing whatever, or changing the loudness.
Right.
I don't know, like I said, if Spotify and Amazon's thing, if they really are boosting it to LUFS, I mean, that's a good question. How are they doing that? Are they literally making, like, processing the audio and then saving their own file version of that? Or are they just adding 2 dB of LUFS somewhere, which I don't know how you would do that, but I'm not worried about it. The standards we're using now are fine, and that's it.
Right.
So, all right. You like the Spreaker web player? I actually haven't seen the Spreaker web player. I've been having like difficulty with my own show with trying to, like, I use the Libsyn player, and it's the custom player, and it's like, it's okay, but it's not the best looking player around, but hey, it works, and it's, it comes with my Libsyn account, and it's fine. I think it's fine. But I see these other players, and some of these other players look really good, and so you're saying the Spreaker player is really cool, huh?
I love the way it looks. I mean, you can have a light version or a dark version. You can you can choose to have a photo with it, either like right in the player or next to the player. And you also can do chapters if you want. Now, I don't really bother to do that, but I've done it occasionally where you can, at 42 seconds in, this is what's up. At a minute and a half, we talk about this, whatever. And you can actually have a photo for each one of those quote unquote chapters.
Right.
There's different players, like there's this, what is it? Simple something press or whatever. Simple podcast press or simple podcast. Yeah. Which I like that one too. A lot of people use because it's got these different buttons where, like, you could have somebody could join your email list right from one of the buttons underneath it, or they can go right to iTunes and subscribe, or wherever you want to send people. So there's some cool options with that one. The Libsyn player is fine. I've used that. I used that before I got going with Spreaker, and I also used the very simple one from Blueberry. At the bottom of the blog post, so somebody gets to the bottom of the blog post, they haven't listened yet. Okay, here's another option for you.
Dude, I love that. Why have one player on the blog post?
That big shiny one at the top was too complicated? Okay, here, just press play before you leave.
Isn't that weird, though? I really find that happens. Like, a lot of times you'll be looking on a web page and someone will be like, hey, click play. And you'll be like, I don't see the player. Or they'll be like, hey, click the link to go here. And you're like, I don't see it, but it's right in front of your face. Like, that does happen. I think that's sort of normal. So
here's
I like
your second chance.
Yeah, second chance to click play. That's pretty cool. I love that. Or just, like, every paragraph, just insert a player. That'd be funny.
If I do a video version, I'll insert the video, or a video related to the podcast, because the podcast version will never be exactly the same as the video, because I'll do an intro, I'll do some editing, whatever. But I'll often include the video as well. If somebody would rather watch it on video, that's fine with me.
Got it. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. So, all right. So for video, let's talk about it real quick.
Okay.
The webcam, you got the Logitech C922X.
Right. The C920 was kind of the standard one that most people were using, and then this one came out. I got this one. I don't really know what the difference between the two is, but those are kind of your run-of-the-mill external webcam. Definitely a huge improvement over, what's built into a MacBook or something like that.
Yeah, I have the C920, and it's really good, and everyone loves it. So, I mean, and so yours is one step up from that, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm using any of the extra features or whatever, but yeah, it's fine. It's not perfect. It's not as good as the camera in your phone for some things, and it's certainly not as good as using a camcorder or DSLR. But for most people, for what they're doing with live streaming, it makes it so easy to just plop that webcam right down on your computer and go.
So this is what I want to ask you for live streaming.
Sure.
I want to know, from a non-technical point of view, what does it take to be a good streamer? Like, I mean, we all know, okay, you need the technology. You need to stream your video and audio somehow. And obviously, if you make your video better, that's, if you make it look better and sound better, that's obviously good. But, like, are there any, like, like unwritten rules of streaming, and also what about like how long it takes to start getting people to watch? Because I know I've done a few streams and stuff, and like it literally seems like when I'm streaming, there's like maybe 2 people there and all that. So what can you say to me as a person who's just getting into this and starting? What should I be aware of, and how long is it going to take to get going?
Well, from a technical aspect, the most important part of your live video is your audio. So you're pretty well dialed in that area. So you don't have to worry about that. The next most important thing, or the most important thing, even more important than your audio quality, is the content. And if you're able to do great podcasts, I've listened to your live videos, you have no problem in the content area whatsoever. You have compelling content, great personality, you do a great job with this stuff. So you're great on both of those areas. The other aspect of live streaming, which you know, from what I've seen, you're also really good at, is the engagement. And that's you have a live chat. And so engaging the chat, bringing in questions, welcoming people, things like that are an aspect of live streaming that, for example, podcasting or even radio or live TV hosts don't have to do. So that's an important aspect of it. Other than that, I mean, it's you do what you do, and over time you'll build an audience. I think it depends on platforms. I think Facebook Live is probably the easiest to build an audience on, because you have friends and family, or if you have a business page and you go live on that, you've got people who've already opted into your business page, so they're interested in what you're doing. YouTube's a tough game to build an audience through live streaming. A lot of people just go there to search for what they want to learn, or what's going to make them laugh or whatever, and it takes a while sometimes to get traction in the algorithm. And I don't know whether they reward live streaming or not, the way Facebook seems to want you to live stream. And Instagram is another good place to live stream. Again, if you have a following on Instagram, there's usually a community there that's excited to see that you went live and jump in and want to chat, through commenting and so forth. I went the guest route in the beginning, like where every one of my live streams were a lot like a podcast, where I went live, I did an intro, I brought a guest on, talked to the guest, opened it up for people to ask questions in the chat, brought in comments that were relevant, things like that, promoted whatever the guest was working on, promoted it ahead of time, promoted the live show before, promoted it afterwards, repurposed it, things like that. That's kind of been my formula. And then now, as I've been doing it longer, I do more spontaneous. I don't keep to quite the schedule that I did in the beginning, because now people know that I go live. It's not like, what is this thing he's doing here? So
what would you say about people who, podcasters, right? Like even me. Does it make any sense for me, or let's say anybody who has a podcast, is it worth like streaming live while you're recording it? Like if you and I right now were streaming live and recording it for the podcast, well, I guess that's kind of what you do.
Yeah, I mean, you'd get people who'd want to sort of look in on this conversation and see the two of us, and you get people for whom finding their way around the podcast directory or listening to things that aren't live, they're more in the moment, right? So it's, oh, Ross and Chris are live. Okay, let's see what they're up to. I don't want to miss out on this, or let's see what they're talking. In other words, I find that live streaming is more like radio than podcasting. Okay. Does that make sense? Because live streaming is live, and with radio, you get people getting in and out of their cars, right? And the idea is to try and kind of keep them in the car, right. Make them want to take that extra block to hear what you're saying. But you acknowledge that the audience is coming and going. The people who started listening at 3 aren't necessarily listening at 6 or whatever when your show ends. So with live streaming, even if your show's a half an hour to an hour, on a platform like Facebook, there's a lot of distractions, right? People get notifications, they get messages, they get a text, whatever. They're going to jump out. They see something else going on, then they come back. So it's a little bit different mentality. Whereas in a podcast, you know that the people who are listening at 55 minutes probably heard everything up until 55 minutes. Right? But in a live stream, you have to reset a little more often. You have to, there's the need to keep teasing and sort of promoting and recapping and things like that. But I think you should try doing a few episodes. I mean, far be it from me to tell you what to do. You're doing terrific at what you're doing. But I mean, why not try an episode that you think, okay, just, it doesn't even necessarily have to be one that you publish as a podcast. But what if you took this formula and took it to a live stream, but just tweaked it a little bit?
Yeah, I actually have plans to do that. I do. The only thing is, it's more a matter of time. Like because any sort of new project like that, it is a project and it is a commitment.
Right.
Like if you're really going to start streaming maybe once a week and maybe even at the same day or on the same day at the same time, that's like, now I got to clear my schedule. Now I got to make sure I'm prepared.
Right.
The whole, it's same thing with starting a new podcast show, right? When we're new in podcasting, we're like, oh, I'm going to start a new show about, Colorado crickets. And it's like, I mean, you could start a million new shows, and then someday it hits you that like, dude, this is actually a lot of work, and I just don't have time to do it all. So that's like deciding what to do it's not easy. But I am doing some live streaming, and I already promised myself that like for the rest of this year, 2018, I'm just going to try stuff, and I'm not going to necessarily stay on a schedule, and I'm just going to try stuff. I have a few things I want to try, which I'm not going to announce yet, because I want to just try them. But anyway, I'm just going to try and have fun with it and see where it goes at this point.
I think an advantage of what we're doing here today, which is just podcast only, recording, no live, no audience, whatever, is that it does let us get to a depth in the subject matter that we probably wouldn't get to if we're watching a chat. We're seeing who's coming in and going, and we're bringing in questions from other people and stuff like that. I mean, the questions from the chat are amazing because you'll get questions that you never would have thought of asking, right? But at the same time, we probably wouldn't be talking about my third interface, right? Like we probably would get through maybe a little bit about one interface, and then the question would take us from the chat, would take us in a different direction or something like that. But your show's for people who really dig the gear and really want to go deep with this stuff. So that's, I think there's an advantage to doing podcast only, because we're less distracted by a lot of things that we would be distracted on, including remembering to look at the camera and stuff like that. I mean, this is just becomes almost like two friends talking on the phone, which is what I think a lot of good radio is a lot like. With co-hosts and host and guests and things like that. Video, there's a different feel to it.
Right.
But the principles of good podcasting and good radio, you bring them to live streaming, you're going to probably be pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, and I also, one of my plans was one of my ideas, which I think I'm going to do is actually keep this podcast as it is, because it is what it is. And for my live streaming, do different stuff. So there's other things I want to do. So that, I think keeping them sort of separate in a way would be good, because like you said, on these podcast episodes, we can go really deep and do what we do. But when I'm streaming live, then I can do those other things where there's things that need to be more visual and also interaction, stuff like that. I even thought of because I have to do post-production on every one of these episodes for the Podcast Engineering Show. So I thought, and it usually takes me, 2 or 3 or 4 hours usually. And I'm like, hey, why don't I just live stream while I'm doing all the post-production? But then I thought, you know what, there's a lot of that time would be really boring. And if I literally had to watch a chat and answer questions, I wouldn't get much done, and it would take probably 8 hours to do it.
What's that dial you're touching? Why are you touching that dial?
Yeah, well, the thing is, like the editing, like the really detailed stuff. It's like, I mean, when I'm EQing and compressing a voice and setting the de-esser and getting my level, like I might listen to the same 10 seconds of audio for like 5 minutes.
Right.
and just
to
dialing
anybody
it
in the
in.
next room, that's annoying, let alone to, because I do the same thing. Like, where am I going to cut this? Okay, I listen to it again. No, I can cut it cleaner if I go back a millisecond or something. Let's listen to it again.
Yeah, so I thought that kind of stuff would not fly over very well for live streaming because people would be like, oh my God, just edit the damn thing.
Hi, this is. No, we're going to have to do that one again.
I mean, I'm tweaking a narrow band of EQ, but like 0.2 dB and trying to discern the difference. And people are just going to be like, it sounds the same. Move on.
I mean, I hate to tell you, they can't tell a Samson QU2 from an RE20, from a Shure SM7B to from a, they can tell the Blue Yeti because they'll hear the lawnmowers 3 states over, but
they'll hear Flight 1760.
Seriously, like people are listening to this stuff through different platforms, through different speakers, through different computer. Like when you think about all the different places this audio goes before it gets to the listener,
right?
And it still takes a discerning ear, even when you're doing your own thing, right? I mean. You've probably gotten to the point where you can tell a lot of stuff that even like I can't tell from not being as deep into it. And then the average listener probably isn't half as into it as I am. So you can just see like you go out further and further. So yeah, I mean you could probably live stream with your setup and make a podcast out of it with less work than you need to do. But this is your business and you're a pro. And it's like, when you've done the right amount of work, when you've used the best options you can.
Right.
And so you want to live up to those standards. And it's the same thing for me with the sort of the on-air side of the content, right? It has to be at a certain standard. The only thing I'll say for people live streaming is, it's better to do it if you promoted it, if you said you were going to do it, than it is to get it perfect. So like if you have to use your third best mic or you have to use, like you would never go, okay, I've got 3 mics to use. I'm going to use the third best one today because that's what I feel like, right? For no reason.
Right.
But if that's what it comes down to getting it on, I mean, if you have to use a telephone, if you have to use, the built-in webcam mic or whatever, it's better to get the show on and make good on your promise than it is to not do that,
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow, there's a lot more stuff we could talk about. I got all your, with regards to video, I got all your specs here with your camcorder, your capture card, your software. I'm going to put that in the show notes.
Okay.
So we won't talk about it now, but folks can see all the different stuff you use there. And we talked a lot about your workflow. I think for this episode, we've done good, Ross. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing so much with us, man.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really admire what you do, and I've learned a ton from listening to your podcast, and it's an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, and I'm psyched for you, man. You're really just killing it with the live streaming, and you're a guy who I'm watching to see what I can do and how to do it and all that. So if you ever see me live streaming and doing something wrong, dude, lay the smack down, bro. Don't hold back.
And you tell me if you see a way I can upgrade my audio.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Happy to make suggestions and all that. So
sounds good.
So this has been awesome. So, and you're recording your own file locally on your MixPre 3, so you could send me that afterward, Ross.
Will do.
Okay. And so livestreamuniverse.com. That's the website. Go to livestreamuniverse.com. Ross Brand. Thanks again, man. And as always, check out the next semester of Podcast Engineering School on podcastengineeringschool.com. If you have any questions for me, let me know. And Ross, you have to yell "sound great," okay?
Okay.
Ready? Go! Sound great!
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well. It's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and rip it down now. You things we did still hold their meaning. And does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. The world your theory